Welcome to Cause Before Symptom, uncovering the real cabal and spiritual forces that are controlling the world. And now, here is your host, James Carner.
Welcome to Cause Before Symptom. I'm your host, James Carner. Today is February 22, the 22nd of 2026, and tonight's episode is all about factor framework when Baal, or pronounced also Baal, becomes the accusation. Yeah, tonight's investigation begins with a question from listener Maria Florencia, who asked whether those operating at the highest levels of global finance and governance are participating in rituals tied to the same dark forces described in Scripture, referencing testimony from European financier Ronald Bernard. Her concern opens a broader inquiry into a claim that has grown increasingly common across media, sermons, and online commentary. Are modern elites literally reviving ancient religious practices such as the worship of Baal, or are symbolic behaviors within private power networks being interpreted through a theological vocabulary once used by the prophets to describe covenant betrayal? Now, doing a lot of research as I do, drawing from a wide range of materials, including sociological studies of elite retreats, journalistic reporting on financial scandals, theological reflections on idolatry, fictional portrayals of secret societies, and initiatory philosophical texts from fraternal systems, the broadcast tonight examines how the figure of Baal has moved from an ancient Near Eastern storm god associated with agricultural provision into a modern shorthand for misplaced trust in systems promising security and prosperity apart from divine covenant. Well, along the way, contemporary controversies involving ceremonial pageantry, entertainment spectacles, and even scanned financial documents are explored to understand how ritual accusations can emerge in the public imagination when secrecy, symbolism, and scandal actually converge. Now, tonight's episode ultimately distinguishes between what is historically documented and what is symbolically interpreted and what remains unverified. While history demonstrates that wrongdoing can be concealed by powerful institutions, the materials reviewed do not provide independently corroborated evidence that modern global elites are engaged in a literal religious worship of Baal in the ancient cultic sense described in Scripture. So the investigation tonight, therefore, remains open, requiring further documentation and evidence before such claims can move from interpretation into demonstrable fact. So that's what we're talking about tonight. I'm really looking forward to the show. Shout out to everybody on the live chat Rumble. Number one warrior is Jeffrey. Jeffrey saying, hey, y'all, have you guys heard we almost at war with Iran? Well, didn't we bomb Iran and no war started? I don't think we're almost at war. Jeffrey, last night, my show, we talked all about this. No, this is just posturing, and no, we're not almost at war, so chill out, dude. It's all good. Jeffrey also says, and we almost got no water at all. Damn, those AI centers taking all their fresh water. There's not, that is so not even true. I don't even know how to approach that one. Guys, data centers are not taking all of our water, okay? Trust me. You have to understand what a data center is. To cool data centers, they need refrigeration. And if they don't have refrigeration, they use cool air from outside, like, data centers in Norway or whatnot. And if they don't have that, they do have a water source, but the water is actually circulated throughout the building. It's not just coming from a spring and then going through the data center and leaving. That's not what's happening. Don't go there, please. It's not true. They're not taking all of our fresh water. There just simply isn't enough data centers out there that could even, right now anyway, just even make a 0.00001% impact on water, period. So that's not the issue. So let's not go there. Number 2 warrior is Royal Rumble saying, what's up, Pastor? What's up, warriors? God bless each and every single one of us. Thank you, Royal. Number 3 warrior is Scorpion saying, hey, Pastor. Hey, warrior family. Interesting crowd you had on TikTok last night. It was fun. It was an interesting crowd. It's really weird. I'm starting to, get some more people back to the show because of TikTok. Isn't that funny? And number 4 warrior is Boots Hafter. Boots stating, let's get ready to rumble with our host, James Carner, the voice of the Rumble airwaves and creator of ElitePotion.com. Thank you. Yes, we still have these for sale. I don't know if the company's going to make it, to be honest, because I just can't sell any more than one set a month, and that just isn't going to make it because I have to pay all kinds of little tiny things like, merchant account fees, which is like $150. These cost $150. I got to sell one a day just to survive. Otherwise, it just doesn't make any sense. But if you guys are interested in removing parasites and heavy metals, my product, ElitePotion.com, I believe is the best on the scene, but I don't have the funds to put into it anymore because I've already put 20 grand into it and I'm already down. So that's just how it is. But thank you, Boots. Everyone, also, Boots says, hello, warrior family. Glad to see you all. Let's hit that thumbs up button. That would be great. Thank you. If you could all take your thumb like this, do it with me. Go down to your phone and hit that X button and then hit like or thumbs up. That would be great. And then hit live chat. Thank you. That would be great. Rumble only gives me a shout out when it comes to likes versus how many subscribers we have. Thank you so much. Number 5 warrior is Robert Gertison saying, hi, everyone. Let's learn some facts tonight. I look forward to it. Well, me too. Thank you so much, Robert Gertison. We love you. Royal Rumble then follows up. The more I'm looking into it, Baal worship seems to go back to Saturn worship. They're kind of the same thing. I would agree. And Jeffrey says, people haven't figured out yet that the Talmud is evil and looks at us non-Jewish people as goyim. Yeah. Well, the Talmud it's just writings of rabbis and their interpretations over the decades and centuries of what they think the Talmud or what they think the Torah really means. And they've scared so far off the truth that they're absolutely insane. In fact, we did a show on this. You can go to jamescarner.com and you can find it. We talked about how the Talmud, they were arguing, the rabbis in the Talmud were arguing how much money it costs for a 6-year-old virgin. And if they've been wood penetrated or not, it would be cheaper than the monies that they were discussing. That is disgusting. So, priests were marrying 6-year-olds back then. Wicked stuff. And apparently, a lot of people have this religion of Kabbalah. Kabbalistic religion, and the word cabal actually comes from that, I do believe. Guys, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. Let's get directly into breaking news.
Welcome to Shitty Breaking News with your host, James Carner, offering his shitty opinion.
Mexican forces kill El Mencho, a nation's most wanted cartel boss. Bye-bye. So sad. Goodbye. Snow intensifying with worsening weather. Northeast blizzard conditions expected. New York is expected to get a foot. I did read somewhere that the New York mayor told everybody to chip in and we'll pay you for it to get a shovel. And I do believe that it's illegal to shovel any snow in New York. So kind of a catch-22, a misnomer, I don't know. Oops, I really fucked it up there. Well, that's the mayor of New York, who is a socialist, who wants to bring $127 billion to New York every year to pay for their socialist shit. Well, good luck with that. New York, it was wonderful while you were. Socialism just isn't going to work if you don't hold your people elected under their checks and balances. But hey, we'll see what happens there. Armed man killed after entering perimeter of Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort. Well, an armed man, he was killed entering the perimeter of Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort. Well, hey, he is the president, okay? Anybody step foot on his properties, you should expect to get shot by the Secret Service because they're protecting the president, regardless if you like him or not. They're going to protect him. And you were armed too. So what in the hell are you doing there? Well, he's dead. Or he or she. I don't know. I don't care. Stock futures fall amid uncertainty about Trump's new tariffs. Well, apparently we're all going to die. No, we're not. They're just going to go down a little bit and then they're going to go back up. That's how it always is. Okay. Nothing new under the sun here. We need to stop freaking out and put all of our hope and faith and trust in Jesus Christ. That's what I've been saying on my TikTok lives lately. It's like, guys, we need to chill. Everything's okay. God's in control here. The problem is when we allow our hearts to believe in what the headlines say, then we're giving up our fear. And, well, not giving up our fear, we're giving them fear, and they feed off of that fear because, well, you continue to pay your taxes that way. I'm not giving into it. I'm not worried about America. I'm not from here. I'm an ambassador. I'm representing the kingdom of heaven. And my job is to show through action who Jesus Christ is. And that's by loving my neighbor. That's how I do it. I would expect most would follow me in the same path. So don't worry about the stock. Who cares? And don't worry about your money being put into it. Who cares? Stop worrying about it. Because the Bible says, hey, worry for naught. Don't worry. God's got this, okay? And whatever the devil takes from you, you can get back sevenfold. So, hey, if the devil takes your money through these stock crashes, let it. You can now, to catch a thief, you can make them pay back sevenfold. And how do you do that? You enter the courts of heaven, and then you say, I'd like my sevenfold in return, please. There's ways to do it, I promise. U.S.-Iran talks expected Thursday to discuss nuclear proposal. Well, that's what's going on, Jeffrey. Sorry, dude. They're just talking and posturing, and we did a show about it last night. Explains it all. No, we're not going to war. There really isn't any real reason here. It's not about the nuclear crap. It's really about, will Iran stop giving Russia and China oil from northern Iran? That's really what these talks are about. So the talks are, and they're behind the scenes, they're going to be saying, okay, you need to stop giving cheap crude to China and Russia because you're playing around with our profits. And they don't like that because we took Venezuela and now we're going to, point our fingers at Iran. Iran is just not that interesting anymore. It doesn't matter. They're not a boogeyman. They don't have nukes. And even if they did, one nuke against 50 heading their way doesn't make any sense. Think about it. Even if Iran had 20 nukes, when they hit the button, 75 are going to head their way, okay? Sevenfold. They're going to blow up the entire Middle East, and believe me, no one wants to do that. Everyone's happy living off of the debt system. And when I say everyone, I mean the leaders of the world. And there will be live updates about the heavy snow and the strong winds that are hitting nor'easter. Well, great. Now, for the rest of us, we don't have to worry about this stuff. We're not from here. We are ambassadors of the kingdom of heaven, and our job is to represent Jesus Christ. We're supposed to shine him outwardly so people can actually, be happy for once in this fallen world. That's been breaking news. When we come back, tonight we're talking about factor framework when Baal, the idol Baal, becomes the accusation. We're going to be talking all about that, so stick around, folks.
Why do 75% of people feel exhausted all the time? The answer might surprise you. In the 1920s, Standard Oil decided to dive into medicine. They pushed synthetic petroleum into our drugs. Sure, it masked symptoms, but it wrecked our guts. Our good bacteria, which fight off parasites and heavy metals, got wiped out by crude oil. But here's the good news. We can fix this by going back to nature. Introducing Elite Potion, the world's top detox program. It restores your good bacteria by removing toxic threats like aluminum, strontium, barium, and parasites. Imagine feeling energized and alive again. They said there couldn't be a pill that did it all. We invented it. Visit elitepotion.com and reclaim your health from synthetic pharmaceuticals. Your body will thank you.
Every year, millions of Americans sign a contract they don't even know exists. They think it's just another tax return, but that signature means something far deeper. It starts with that first job at 16. The system takes a piece of her check, then promises to give some back if she signs the return. Every April 15th, the same cycle repeats, not by law, but by belief. The system didn't bind them, their own signature did. Learn the truth at unincorporatedAssociations.com.
All right, we're back, folks. Back to the show. Factor framework when Baal becomes the accusation. Now, a listener wrote me named Maria Florencia. She's on our YouTube, and she wrote in a question that has been asked in many different ways over the past decade. It's a good question, but rarely actually examined with care, with facts backed by what the Holy Spirit wants us to know. Okay, we can't just start pointing the finger and accuse and then just say, well, it's gotta be. We need information. We need facts. Okay. Now, she referenced the testimony of European financier Ronald Bernard, who has publicly claimed that individuals within the highest levels of global finance are bound together not merely by contracts or influence, but by ritual, by shared participation in acts meant to secure loyalty, advancement, and protection within elite networks. Now, her question was simple, but it carries enormous weight. And I told her I will always go in and investigate anything you guys ask me to, because that's my job. And I'm going to look at it from a wisdom point of view, a logical point of view, and a non-accusatory point of view until I have the full evidence to back up my claim. Now, are the most powerful people in the world participating in rituals tied to the same dark spiritual forces described in Scripture? Well, if they are, they would have to be the Lee family, it would have to be the Orsini family, it would have to be the Farnese, it'd have to be the Aldobrandini, it would have to be the Massimo, it would have to be every single one of the 13 black nobilities and the illuminated ones. And I do believe, just like Christianity, Satanism has different denominations. But I personally do believe that they all worship the same entity. But what we're going to find out is they've been hiding a lot of this stuff, and it's really hard to dig it up. I can't find anything as of full stable proof yet, but we do have enough to raise our eyebrow and go, that's peculiar, and that's what we're going to be talking about. So are they the most powerful people in the world participating in satanic rituals tied to Satan, Lucifer himself? Well, that question has grown louder and louder and louder in recent years, especially when you look at the football halftime show, or when you look at the Olympics and their satanic freaking their shows. The question is getting louder, and the language, literally the language of Baal and Moloch and sacrifice, has appeared not only in sermons and devotional writings, but in commentary about entertainment spectacles, political ceremonies, financial scandals, and even like the Epstein files, and even corporate governance. Yeah, images of bulls, fire, and robed figures circulate widely, often accompanied by the suggestion that ancient religious practices have not disappeared, but merely gone private, hidden behind closed doors, protected by influence, and shielded from public scrutiny. Like if you've watched the movie Eyes Wide Shut, you would automatically assume that all of the religious leaders of the world are all satanic, sicko, sexual deviants. Well, at the same time, those same symbols appear in very different contexts. Academic studies of elite retreats describe ceremonial openings as symbolic stress release rituals intended to foster trust among participants before policy discussions begin. Still sus, but That's what they say is happening. And fraternal philosophical texts actually use mythic imagery as allegory for moral ascent and disciplined self-governance. Well, fictional novels, they're everywhere and talk about this stuff, but they're fictional novels, and they portray secret societies performing surgical divination to predict stock markets, while theological essays redefine Baal not as a literal statue, but as any system in which human beings place their trust for provision or security. So the same word Baal, which is spelled B-A-A-L, is now used to describe an ancient storm god, a biblical rival to covenant loyalty, a metaphor for cultural idolatry, a critique of economic dependence, a fictional ritual device, and a geopolitical accusation. Now, in one recent financial controversy, the mere appearance of the word in a scanned document was enough to trigger widespread claims of ritual worship, despite later reporting that no verified investigator had linked the individuals involved to any religious practice of that kind. Now, history does show that powerful institutions can conceal wrongdoing. Secrecy, legal pressure, and social influence have at times delayed the exposure of a serious crime for years later, even before documentary evidence or whistleblower testimony brought them to light. This is important. Now, the possibility of concealment cannot be dismissed outright. We have to understand that. So, the possibility is not proof. And tonight's investigation does not begin with an answer. It begins with Maria Florencia's question and an examination on and of how ancient theological language, modern symbolic practice, sociological bonding rituals, fictional portrayals, and public scandal can overlap in ways that make interpretation very difficult. Sorry. Now, are modern elites reviving an ancient fertility cult? Well, or are observers applying prophetic shorthand once used by Jeremiah and Hosea to describe misplaced trust, now directed towards markets, institutions, or technological systems that promise security apart from covenant obedience? Well, before fear is allowed here to move through the conscience, the claim must be defined with precision. And that's what I'm about. And that's what I want to do. I do not want to give you guys stuff that just isn't true. Now, I'm looking at the live chat rumble, and there's some weird thing says Plasma has written. I have no idea, but literally when you go there, something says Plasma has rated this stream. I have no idea what that means, but apparently it's rated this stream. So, okay. I've never seen that before, but well, we'll see what Plasma does. But all of a sudden we have 26 people now when before, well, we didn't have that much. Now, before any modern accusation can be meaningfully evaluated, the historical identity of Baal must be defined with precision. In the ancient Near Eastern world, Baal, or Baal, was not a generic demon or abstract symbol. He was understood to be a regional storm and fertility deity associated with rain, clouds, lightning, and agricultural productivity. I don't know, but that's what it says. And the Bible talks about Baal and all that stuff too. So that's interesting. Now, in societies where survival depended almost entirely on seasonal rainfall, the arrival or absence of rain meant the difference between abundance and famine. The figure of Baal therefore emerged not as an object of atheistic devotion or aesthetic devotion, but as a proposed guarantor of provision. Now we're starting to get some new people in. For example, Watchman for You says, nice Wolfgangs you have there. Plasma sent me. Don't know what that means. Then Plasma Stream says, that's me, mate. I follow you for lovely guitars. Ha! The two Eddie Van Halen guitars I have back there. And Robert Gertison is given the smoke, boots, puff, this. And then Plasma says, I bet the neck's comfortable and fast. One of them's broken. Unfortunately. And also H3IXX_5 says, we're here for your Jew gold yar. I have no idea what that means, but okay, at least you're here and you're laughing. Also, Das Rasis says, a raid is when one streamer ends by sending his audience to your stream. Well, thank you very much, Plasma, for raiding my stream. I appreciate it. Now, texts, we're talking about Baal. If the leaders of the world are satanic Baal or Moloch worshipers. We're going to get to the bottom of this. Now, texts from Ugarit and surrounding regions depict Baal as the one who rides the clouds, whose authority was expressed through the life-giving storms that sustained crops and livestock. Well, his appeal lay in the belief that he could regulate the cycles of nature upon which communities depended. Sounds like HARP, sounds like our Navy, who in an AOL article in 1999 said that they would own the weather by 2026. We're here then. So it looks like Baal turned into, I would say, a technological thing now, but hey. Plasma says, no problem. I've been Baal bashing for 10 hours. Right on. Well, thank you. I appreciate that very much. Now, to his appeal lay in the belief that he could regulate the cycles of nature. Now, to trust Baal was to trust that the heavens would open at the right time, that fields would bear fruit, and that famine could be averted through proper ritual alignment. Now, within the Hebrew scriptures, this understanding becomes the backdrop for repeated prophetic confrontations. When Israel is accused of turning to Baal, the issue is not framed primarily as aesthetic idol preference or philosophical curiosity. It is framed as a transfer of allegiance from covenantal provision to an alternative system believed to control the forces of survival. Now, the rivalry between Yahweh and Baal is therefore presented as a question of trust. Who sends the rain? Who sustains the harvest? And who ultimately governs the conditions of life? That's interesting. Now, this tension is illustrated vividly in the narrative of Mount Carmel, where the contest between Elijah and the prophets of Baal centers on which authority can call down fire from heaven. You remember this? I do. It's quite funny. Now, the spectacle is not merely theological. It is agricultural and it's economic. Fire, rain, and fertility are the stakes upon which the future of the nation rests. Well, in this context, Baal functions as a competing source of stability, a proposed mediator between human effort and environmental uncertainty. Interesting. Well, the prophets consistently describe Baal worship not only in terms of ritual practice, but in terms of misplaced dependence. The attraction of Baal lay in his perceived ability to offer predictable outcomes in an unpredictable environment. Sounds like playing with nature. Something that never goes well when you do. Now, through offerings, ceremonies, and seasonal rites, and bloodletting and all kinds of sacrificial lambs or even people, communities sought to align themselves with the power believed to govern rainfall and fertility, so we can get our sperm activated. Now, the expectation was straightforward. Proper devotion would secure material stability. But this helps explain why prophetic language often links Baal worship to economic imagery. References to grain, wine, oil, and livestock appear alongside condemnations of idolatry because the question at stake was never merely theological abstraction. It was about which source would be trusted to sustain life. Now, in agrarian societies, the control of rain was equivalent to the control of the food supply, and therefore the preservation of the community itself. And if you've read the Bible, they've had famines, and then they've had harvests, and then famines, and then harvests. And it seemed like the Jews during the time when they were, on their way from Egypt to the Promised Land, and even when they met their Promised Land, they did have hard times, and they just couldn't wait on God, so they decided to call down Baal. I didn't do it, but that's what they did. So historically, Baal worship cannot be reduced to bowing before a statue. I hope that's what you can come from or get out of this. Das Races, I think, this Reformed Jew has a good breakdown of Baal. Have you seen it? No, I haven't, but thank you for the info. And he says, in it, he admits their God, or G-D, is a mix of Baal and Moloch, or some other IIRC. Interesting. I did not know that. Baal bashing, love it. We got a Rem fan, says Royal Rumble. And Lynn Merck says, you did send us to church. Hey, I'm a pastor, and I look at things from a Christian point of view. So don't be mad at me. I'm not here to say turn or burn. I'm not here to get you to worship my God. I'm not here to get you to stop worshiping Baal either. That's not my job. My job is to present to you if there's any evidence that backs up that the world leaders are worshiping Baal and Moloch. Now, they could be worshiping Belial or Apollo or Apollyon or, all the other names of deities, but that's not what we're talking about. So historically, Baal worship cannot be reduced to bowing before just a simple statue. The same statue that Iran has been burning, and Israel's getting really mad because apparently Israel is upset about Baal statues being burned. But it involved rituals intended to align the community with what was believed to be the controlling force behind weather patterns and crop success. So the promise back then was practical. Secure the favor of Baal and the land will yield its produce. And understanding this original framework is essential before applying the term to any modern behavior. So without it, the accusation risks drifting from a specific historical practice into a generalized label detached from its ancient meaning, right? So if we're talking about Baal worship, back then, and as far as in the Bible or in the Ethiopian canon, it was about harvesting and agriculture. And it wasn't about, this is Baal, I'm not talking about Moloch, but then that's the agricultural god. So once Baal is understood in this original context and framework, the next question becomes unavoidable. If Israel had entered into covenant with Yahweh, why would they turn to a rival system at all? Well, the prophetic record does not present this shift as a sudden rejection of faith, but as a gradual movement born from anxiety, uncertainty, and the daily pressures of survival. Well, okay. Plasma says, Plasma Stream, isn't Moloch a demon god that comes alive at the moment of sacrifice to Baal? It's an entity that exists only at the moment of the killing. I have to do more research about Moloch. This is about Baal, but from my little bit of research about Moloch, it is a god of blood, and it requires sacrifice in order to be appeased. For what kind of power that Moloch gives, I think it has to do with mammon, power, mammon meaning money, power, and for the kings of other surrounding nations, or the heathens, that the King James calls them, that they would worship and gain power over other heathens. So, but I don't have all of the information about Moloch tonight. Good idea. I may do a show about that tomorrow. But tonight's all about Baal, the agricultural god, saying, I will help you with your crops. I'm going to send rain. And your God, Yahweh, just can't do it. Well, Israel was an agrarian society living in a land where rainfall determined whether families would eat or starve, one or the other. And the covenant promised provision, but that provision was tied to obedience and trust in a God who could not be manipulated through seasonal rites. Well, in contrast, neighboring cultures offered a model that appeared far more predictable. Though established ceremonies and through offerings and priestly mediation, Baal was believed to respond to ritual alignment by sending rain at the appointed time. Now, this created a powerful temptation. Absolutely. And the covenant demanded faithfulness without visible mechanism. Baal worship offered a system that claimed to influence environmental outcomes through direct action. And when drought came, the question was no longer purely spiritual. It became practical. And should the community continue trusting in a promise that required obedience and patience, or adopt a ritual framework that promised measurable results? Well, this is what happened. When God doesn't come on their timing, they say, bring us Baal. So the prophets describe this tension repeatedly in the Bible. Appeals to Baal often followed periods of scarcity, political instability, or military threat. Well, in these moments, the appeal of a deity associated with immediate fertility and agricultural success became difficult to ignore. Turning to Baal was not necessarily seen as abandoning Yahweh altogether. It was often framed as a supplemental measure, a way to hedge against uncertainty by engaging multiple sources of provision. But you know what the Bible says? It says you cannot serve two masters, but they were doing it. Now, this blending of allegiances is precisely what the prophetic literature condemns. Baal worship is described not simply as false theology, but as divided trust. Now, the community sought to maintain covenant identity while also participating in rituals intended to secure rain and harvest through alternative means. Well, in doing so, they transferred functional dependence from divine promise to ritual technique. Now, you got to take a step back here and look at the big picture. Don't we all get bananas during the winter, okay? Don't we all have plenty of food, especially in America? There's like a fast food chain in every restaurant or in every city, if not 20 of them. We have so much food in abundance, and there's places of drought, there's places of not. It's all over the place, but it seems like everything's going smoothly in America. So are we worshiping two deities, or are we backing it by science? Well, it looks like, and we're going to be talking about a little bit more, that the leaders are more leaning towards science and less toward Baal. But it doesn't mean that some of the dynasties still worship the devil. So the shift toward Baal was not driven by philosophical curiosity, but by the fear of famine and desire for stability. And it reflected a belief that survival could be safeguarded by aligning with forces believed to control nature's cycles. Now, the rituals associated with Baal became a way of managing risk in an unpredictable environment. And understanding this dynamic is essential for evaluating modern accusations. The prophetic critique was aimed at misplaced reliance, trusting a system believed to guarantee provision apart from covenant obedience. And without recognizing that underlying concern, the term Baal worship risks being applied to behaviors that may share superficial resemblance, but lack the original economic and environmental context that gave the accusation its force. So we're just learning a little bit about the history of Baal and why they were worshiping this agriculture of God, right? So as the biblical narrative moves forward, the figure of Baal does not disappear from theological reflection. Instead, his identity begins to expand beyond a localized storm deity into a broader category used to describe misplaced trust in systems that promise provision apart from covenantal obedience. Now, this development becomes especially visible in modern Christian literature, where Baal is no longer treated primarily as a statue or temple figure, but as a symbolic shorthand for any structure believed to secure stability without reliance on God. Now, in several contemporary devotional and theological works within the material reviewed, Baal is explicitly reframed as economic dependence on wealth, career success, institutional authority, or technological advancement. Keep that in mind. Now, under this interpretation, the ancient rituals intended to secure rainfall are seen as functionally equivalent to modern practices aimed at guaranteeing financial security or social mobility. Well, the concern shifts from physical altars to patterns of allegiance, from bowing before an image to trusting systems believed to control outcomes. So this reframing appears in discussions of market economies, where reliance on investment portfolios or corporate structures is described as placing confidence in mechanisms that promise continuity and growth. So the language of provision becomes central once again. Where ancient communities sought rain through Baal, modern societies may seek stability through markets, policies, or technological solutions. So in both cases, the perceived source of security becomes the focal point of trust. Now, other writings extend the category further, applying the term to cultural participation in entertainment industries, educational systems, or political movements. While the emphasis remains consistent, Baal represents any alternative authority believed to govern survival, success, or societal continuity. Participation in these structures is then evaluated not merely as civic engagement, but as a potential transfer of allegiance. So this interpretive shift allows Baal to function as a diagnostic term within moral critique. When individuals or institutions are seen as placing ultimate confidence in economic forecasts, climate regulation strategies, or institutional safeguards, well, the prophetic language of idolatry is invoked. And the concern is not that these systems exist, but that they may become objects of ultimate reliance. Interesting. So such redefinitions do not require temples or sacrifices in the ancient sense. Instead, they locate Baal in patterns of dependence that mirror the original economic dynamic. The ancient appeal of predictable rainfall becomes analogous to the modern appeal of predictable financial returns or policy outcomes. The underlying question then remains the same: which authority is trusted to sustain life and community? Well, understanding these modern applications is essential before evaluating contemporary accusations. When commentators describe corporations, governments, or cultural institutions as engaging in Baal worship, they may be employing this expanded theological framework rather than alleging literal ritual practice. Well, without recognizing this shift, discussions risk conflating symbolic critique with claims of religious continuity. Now, with the theological category clarified, the investigation now turns to environments where modern accusations of ritual practice most frequently arise. Private elite retreats and invitation-only gatherings attended by political leaders, industrialists, financiers, and military advisors. We've all heard of Bohemian Grove, haven't we? Well, one of the most commonly cited one is Bohemian Grove. It's a seasonal encampment that has hosted presidents, cabinet officials, corporate executives, and policy planners for over a decade. Now, the only reason why the Bohemian Grove got any attention at all, because nobody knew it even existed until a couple of prostitutes, they were male, who got abused there, filed a couple police reports on them. And that's when Alex Jones came in to expose it because, well, the jig was up. However, there is no documentation anymore because, well, the people who were abused by the Bohemian Grove, the paid prostitutes, well, they dropped their file charges against the Bohemian Grove. So we don't have data there. Now, academic sociological studies of such retreats like the Bohemian Grove describe them not as temples or religious institutions, but as mechanisms for trust formation among individuals who operate within the highest levels of national and international decision making. And in settings in where participants are responsible for managing complex economic or geopolitical risks, informal meetings do not. All right. Informal environments can facilitate relationships that formal meetings do not. So extended social contact, shared experiences, and repeated interactions contribute to what researchers call class cohesion, the maintenance of a network capable of coordinating action across institutional boundaries. Now, I am aware of all of the whistleblowers who have come forward, who have seen inside that they've said that they literally just, it's a big sex orgy between all the leaders, and they pay prostitutes of all kinds, and it's just one big, willy-dilly, tickly-tilly. But regardless, we don't have proof beyond just whistleblower testimony. We really need court documentation, and that's important. And unfortunately, the people who were abused by such a group of men, they just didn't move it forward. And that could have been because they were coerced or blackmailed or whatnot. That happens. But tonight, it's all about what we can find and what we can prove. Now, these retreats, they provide opportunities for off-the-record discussion. That's a key distinguished thing there. Now, where business strategies, technological initiatives, or policy concepts may be explored without the constraints of public scrutiny or even media oversight. Now, historical accounts note that significant conversations concerning industrial development, wartime logistics, and infrastructure planning have occurred in such settings. We know all the major presidents have been through the Bohemian Grove. They stopped recording it when they basically turned it off, and they're not really meeting there much anymore. Now, they could have went underground. They could have taken it somewhere else. Who knows? But while decisions are not formally enacted within the retreat itself, the relationships formed there can influence subsequent collaboration in official capacities. So, symbolic ceremonies are sometimes included as part of the encampment's opening or closing events, as we've seen with the Alex Jones features, which I believe Alex Jones was paid to go in there by the Bohemian Grove themselves because they needed to quickly shut down those stories of what happened to those prostitutes. Now, these performances may involve theatrical scripts, music costumes, or effigies intended to mark the transition from ordinary professional obligations to a temporary environment of reflection or camaraderie. Yep, sure, whatever. But sociologists often interpret these rites as liminal bonding rituals or structured activities that temporarily suspend hierarchical distinctions and reinforce group identity prior to collective deliberation. So what they're trying to say, they're like, hey, we're just meeting, no shenanigans. We're not, playing the jesters or jokers of the Freemasons, and we're not doing anything like that. No, there are no prostitutes at the Bohemian Grove. We did not do that. That's what they're saying on paper. That's what we've been finding. But we're hearing all kinds of even more wicked shit that goes on over there. But unfortunately, we need proof. So importantly, participation in such ceremonies does not require theological commitment to the imagery employed. Mythic figures, animal motifs, or allegorical narratives may be used to create a shared symbolic language that emphasizes continuity, tradition, or mutual responsibility. That is, if they're if they're not up to no good. Okay, if they're actually just saying it's just symbolic. but I don't personally, just my opinion, my heart, I don't buy it. I think they're really good at covering shit up. Now, similar practices can be found in military academies, hazing, university fraternities, and professional guilds, where initiation or commemorative rituals serve to integrate new members into an established hierarchy. And we've learned this through, what was that movie with Matt Damon, and it was about the CIA being created. Was it CIA or FBI? I'm not sure, but it was about the fraternities, the Bonesmen, etc. And they put Matt Damon in a coffin, naked. And he's supposed to, masturbate and basically tell all of his worst nightmares to all of his brothers. And they pissed on him, and he got all pissed off. Why are you pissing on me? And they're like, hey, it's all good. We're all going to make a lot of money because our dads are devil worshippers. You know what I'm talking about, that movie? Well, anyway, that movie, whether put out into the open to show what they really do is true or not, I don't know. But I do know that it wouldn't surprise me if these leaders are doing such wicked, horrible, disgusting, nasty shit. Now, for observers unfamiliar with the sociological function of these practices, hazing, no, not born identity, it's, oh my God, who else is in it? The guy who really hates Trump, what's his name? Not Al Pacino, but the other dude, Robert De Niro. He's in it, and he's kind of a crippled old man in that movie, and it's all about the Bones Brigade, and anyway, this is the fraternity that Bush was in, senior and junior. So anyway, at Yale, you know what I'm talking about? I don't know if you guys do or not, but give me a second here. Also, Brad Pitt's ex-wife was in it too. Anyway, for observers unfamiliar with the sociological function, okay, the presence of robes, firelight, or symbolic sacrifice with a ceremonial script may evoke associations with ancient religious rites. Well, from what I've read, Skull and Bones 322, I've read, I don't know if it's true or not, but they drink blood out of the skull of Geronimo. I forgot the whole reasoning behind that, but I've read that they've done that. I don't know. But the visual overlap between theatrical pageantry and historical cultic imagery can therefore contribute to interpretations that frame such gatherings as sites of ritual worship. Now, they say, it's not, we're just doing what we do. But I don't buy it. But I can't prove it. What do you do in these situations? Well, understanding the documented purposes of these retreats, I think, is essential before drawing any conclusions about their meaning. Okay, I'm talking about facts here. And without that context, symbolic bonding activities intended to strengthen professional networks may be perceived as evidence of religious continuity. But again, tonight's episode is all about trying to prove if they're worshiping Baal, just like they did in the old days. Now, many of the accusations surrounding elite gatherings do not arise from policy discussions or membership lists, but from the presence of ceremony itself. When observers encounter structured performances involving fire, costumes, scripted narration, or symbolic sacrifice, the immediate association may be with ancient religious rites. Well, in environments such as Bohemian Grove, the opening ceremony known as the cremation of care has become a focal point for this interpretation. Now, the ceremony involves the symbolic burning of an effigy represented care, understood in this context as the burdens, anxieties, and responsibilities carried by participants in their professional roles. Sure. But through music, theatrical dialogue, and staged pageantry, right? The performances marks the beginning of a retreat intended to provide temporary respite from the pressures of government, industry, or finance. Sure. But the imagery employed, including robes, mythic references, and animal motifs, well, draws upon classical traditions to create a shared aesthetic experience. But I'm not trying to say it's real or not. I just don't know. I've only gotten info from what we've read from certain books and whistleblowers, etc. But look, man, it's important to prove it. And that's what we're trying to figure out here. Plasma Stream says, that's a good point, James. AJ sent into the grove for PR, Alex Jones. I wonder if the sacrifice was staged for that version real when they were on their own. I don't know, but Alex Jones, the only reason why I don't give him any credit is because one time I saw him interrupting a Texas protest. I can't remember what they were protesting, but the people and what they were protesting, I believe was important, and I agreed with what they were protesting with. I can't remember what it was. But Alex Jones and team comes in and they start bullhorning, and they took over the protest, and they managed to steer it from what was really important to protest about to some conspiracy theory that really screwed it all up. So when I saw that visually, and Alex Jones did not care about the actual real protest in Texas at that time, he lost all credibility in my eyes, because what he did, there was no wisdom, there was no discernment. It was me, and then he steered the public opinion to his narrative. And after that, I said, that guy is paid opposition, okay? So they may be dressing in robes and they may have animal motifs, but we've got to have proof, right? So Scientologists, take a step back. Not that word. Sociologists often interpret such ceremonies as liminal rituals designed to facilitate psychological transition from one social state to another. Now, by participating in a structured performance that symbolically releases ordinary concerns, individuals may enter a space where candid conversation and collaborative reflection become more accessible. You know, it kind of like casting a spell on someone. That's what I believe that a lot of these places are for. You know, bring in high leaders and then cast a spell on them and get them to do what you want them to do. Now, similar mechanisms are observed in military initiation rites, academic convocations, and professional oath ceremonies, where symbolic acts reinforce group identity and mutual trust. Right? And it's also a great place to blackmail people. You could say that Bohemian Grove, it got shut down, and then Epstein picked up the pieces. Does that make sense? Could have been. I don't have proof of it, but it sure makes logical sense to me. Now, importantly, these performances are typically scripted and theatrical rather than devotional. Thanks to Alex Jones and his wonderful reporting, how he got in there to begin with is another. Now, the figures represented are allegorical, and the actions performed are intended to convey abstract concepts rather than a petition of a deity, right? So, in this sense, the ceremony functions as a form of organizational storytelling, using dramatic imagery to articulate shared values or aspirations. That's what they want us to think. Nevertheless, the visual resemblance between ceremonial pageantry and historical religious practice can blur interpretive boundaries. Fire, effigies, and mythic symbolism are elements common to both theatrical performance and ancient ritual. So without contextual knowledge here of their intended purpose, observers may interpret such imagery as evidence of literal worship rather than symbolic expression. But understanding this distinction is essential when evaluating claims of ritual activity within elite environments. So the presence of ceremony does not, in itself, indicate theological allegiance. Instead, it may reflect an effort to cultivate cohesion, tradition, or psychological readiness within a closed professional network. But again, we're going off of the evidence and the data that we have currently. We need more whistleblowers, and we need more information about people suing their ass, okay? But there's no lawsuits against them. So the interpretive landscape becomes more complex when fictional portrayals of elite ritual begin to circulate alongside real-world documentation. Over the past several decades, novels, okay, we're talking fiction, novels within the dark academia and occult thriller genres have depicted secret societies operating within universities, financial institutions, or political networks as participants in ceremonial acts intended to secure power, wealth, or even longevity. Now, it could be a case where these authors are trying to expose it, but they can't, or they'll be killed So they have to write it in novel form. So I dove into all of those types of novels and we tried to figure out, hey, are there any relations to what they're doing now, what's happening in this fictional book, and what they've done in the past? I think that's important to bring up. So, in these narratives, initiation rites may involve surgical divination, symbolic sacrifice, or the invocation of hidden forces believed to influence material outcomes such as market performance or geopolitical stability. Now, mythic figures, animal effigies, and ritualized performances are presented not as allegory, but as literal mechanisms through which influence is gained and maintained. And the storylines often connected elite education, inherited wealth, and clandestine gatherings to acts of devotion or exchange with unseen entities. We've heard this throughout Hollywood saying people drink the golden juice, right? And that's a way of drinking the adrenochrome and joining the team and selling your soul to the devil. Well, do they do this stuff? Well, we've got lots of whistleblowers that talk about that. But has anybody sued anybody? Is there anybody who got arrested for, performing a satanic ritual abuse against these actors to expose this? Unfortunately, everything gets covered up. So there you have it. Not to mention Milton says Dostoevsky, not to mention Bill Cooper outed Jones on his own show. Good. I believe Bill Cooper over Alex Jones anytime, but however, he's dead. Now, while these works are explicitly labeled as fiction, their imagery frequently draws upon historical motifs associated with ancient religious practice or fraternal symbolism. They could be right, but they have to print it as fiction. Bowls, firelight, robes, and initiatory language appear in both literary and ceremonial contexts, creating visual and conceptual overlap. Readers encountering such motifs in novels may later recognize similar elements in photographs or descriptions or even the Super Bowl halftime show, like real-world gatherings or even during the freaking Olympics, even when the intended meaning differs. So could they be, not really worshiping the devil, but they want us to think that they're worshiping the devil, but they're hiding any facts of it? And so this is a narrative they want us to go down instead of us trying to figure out what they're trying to do with technology and AI and the image of the beast and all that stuff. I don't know. So media adaptations and online discussions can further blur the boundary between narrative device and documented behavior. Well, that sucks. And scenes designed to dramatize moral corruption or psychological tension may be interpreted as speculative reflections of actual elite conduct. And over time, repeated exposure to fictional depictions of ritualized power can shape expectations about how secrecy and influence operate within high-level networks. Soon we're going to be talking about Albert Pike, so I know what they're really up about, and my spirit does tell me, yeah, a lot of these elite are worshiping the devil, but is it Baal? Is it Belial? Is it Moloch? Is it Apollo or Apollyon or all of these other entities? Tonight's focus is on Baal. So this convergence of fictional storytelling and observation contributes to a feedback loop in which symbolic performances at retreats are viewed through the lens of literary imagination. Now, when ceremonial pageantry is documented in real settings, the resemblance to fictional rituals may reinforce assumptions that narrative portrayals are grounded in fact. Do you guys remember when they opened up that tunnel in, oh, forgive me, I think it's in, Switzerland, I think. The tunnel in Switzerland that's supposed to, open up between one big mountain and some sort of a way to get through, anyway. They had some strange, satanic looking ritual with all kinds of beasts with horns coming out. It literally looked like an apocalyptic scene. And if you read these types of fiction novels and then you see that, you could go, oh my God, the elite are doing it. Well, maybe. I just can't prove it. Now, when ceremonial pageantry is documented and people see it, they could bring a narrative that portrays grounded fact. But conversely, fictional works may draw inspiration from genuine traditions of initiation or bonding, amplifying their dramatic features for narrative effect. So, recognizing the role of fiction in shaping public perception is therefore essential. Without this awareness, discussions of elite ceremony risk conflating imagination storytelling with empirical evidence, allowing narrative structures to inform conclusions about real world practice. And another thing to mention, man, they're really good at hiding shit. So, compartmentalization has proven that we can keep us, the military industrial complex can keep a secret for more than 20 years. So we just don't know. But beyond fiction and theology, the figure of Baal has also entered modern political discourse as a symbolic accusation. In recent years, protest movements, opinion journalism, and state-sponsored demonstrations have employed imagery associated with ancient deities to frame contemporary conflicts in moral or spiritual terms. Horned effigies, bull statues, and fire-lit spectacles have appeared in public rallies or ceremonial performances, often accompanied by claims that opposing institutions embody the corruption once attributed to pagan worship. Now, in some geopolitical contexts, Baal imagery has been used to represent alleged moral decadence within rival nations or leadership classes. Well, demonstrations have featured the burning of horned figures labeled with national symbols intended to associate political adversaries with practices condemned in biblical narratives, like what Iran did. Now, the symbolism functions less as an assertion of literal religious activity and more of a visual shorthand for perceived ethical failure or exploitation. Commentary surrounding entertainment events has adapted similar language. Stadium performances, corporate branding, or celebrity choreography are sometimes described as Baal-like due to their scale, emotional intensity, or perceived promotion of materialism. And these interpretations, they frame mass participation in spectacle as analogous to ancient festivals dedicated to fertility or abundance, even when no devotional intent is present. So in this way, Baal becomes a rhetorical device through which complex social or political concerns are expressed. Now, accusations of worship are directed not toward temples or priesthoods, but toward economic systems, media industries, or governance structures believed to prioritize profit or influence over moral accountability. And the ancient deity is thus invoked to articulate criticism of modern institutions. Kind of a way of thinking like this. Instead of us focusing on them stealing money from us, the central banks and how they work and how they print money and make money off the interest that they loan to us from our own money. That's a central bank. And they also monitor every single bank inside that country and know their ledgers so they can go after any of their competitors that they want, full central control. Well, could they be purposely putting this kind of ritualistic behavior out there just to get us to think that they are Satanists so that we focus on them being Satanists and how they are baby eaters and blood drinkers instead of just thieves stealing money from us? You see, they want us to go, it could be, I don't know, but it could be that they want us to go after them in lawsuits about their devil worship and killing people instead of lawsuits about them stealing money from our own pockets. It could be. So understanding this usage is essential when evaluating contemporary claims. When Baal imagery appears in protest or commentary, it may reflect a moral judgment rather than an allegation of literal ritual practice, right? Now, the symbolic association draws upon familiar scriptural themes to communicate concern about power, corruption, or misplaced allegiance within public life. You guys are commenting so much, it's hard to keep up. Limerick says, well, pick of Trump with high priest and Moloch. There's a pic apparently, a pic of Trump with a high priestess of Moloch. Trump also has the Ark of the Covenant at Mar-a-Lago. I don't trust Trump with a 10-foot pole. I don't believe in the Q thing anymore. I did until I started doing research, and I found out that Q was actually Craig Oxley, who started the whole thing against the Vatican, and then the Tavistock Institute, paid for by DARPA Institute. This is all on my website. Paid Dennis Liam Toohey, who is Craig Oxley, to go back and start the Q movement and get all of the right to not go to arms against the government and just sit back and eat popcorn and watch the government fuck us over like they've always been. That's just my interpretation. But the dynamics explored in earlier sections, well, became especially visible in the public response to the Epstein financial document controversy. Following the release of certain records connected to Jeffrey Epstein and his network, online observers identified what appeared to be the word Baal within a scanned transaction entry. And almost immediately, the term was circulated across social media platforms as potential evidence that elite financial actors were connected to ancient ritual practices described in Scripture. I'm sorry. I wanted to say. I wanted it to be real, but it's just not enough proof yet. I'm sorry. It sucks. I'm trying to get the proof, but I'm not going to put stuff up here on my show unless I can back it up with sources. And there just isn't enough sources to get these Satanists. Sorry, but they're just too damn good at hiding shit. It's not my fault. What's in the box? So the interpretive leap occurred, the Epstein stuff, it leaped rapidly. It went viral. Because Epstein's activities already involved secrecy, exploitation, and access to influential networks. Bill Gates. I'm sorry, Kill Gates. I always forget. No, his name is Kill. No, it's Bill. Bill Gates. Kill Gates. It's Bill. The appearance of a word associated with biblical demonology was taken by some as confirmation of a hidden religious dimension to his crimes. Well, visual screenshots of the document were shared widely, accompanied by commentary linking the alleged entry to historical accounts of sacrifice or occult devotion. Now, subsequent reporting, however, indicated that no investigator, no court filing, or witness testimony had established any connection between Epstein and the worship of Baal in a literal religious sense. However, if you look at his island, the island was the temple, I believe. Wasn't it an exact replica of the King Solomon's temple, I think? And didn't, what's her name? Have the same background screen. Ellen, had Epstein Island behind her. Anyway, but again, it's about proof. Now, journalists examining the record suggested that the appearance of the term may have resulted from a clerical abbreviation, formatting artifact, or an optical character recognition error introduced during the digitization process. But in other words, the text, the Epstein-Baal word, may not have contained the real world in its original form at all. Remember, I'm just about evidence. That's what's important, because then you can take people to court and get them. Now, this sequence of events, right, pictures, OCA pictures of documentations, are, not text, can be blurred, can be associated. Things like that can happen, okay? And this does illustrate how symbolic vocabulary can shape perception when combined with existing suspicion. But on the thing itself, it didn't say that, hey, can't wait to see a Tuesday when we worship Baal and then we sacrifice our babies Sunday to Moloch. It just doesn't say that. So we can't come out and say with full backed sources that that's what they're doing. So the documented reality of criminal behavior created an interpretive environment in which ambiguous textual data was readily integrated into a broader narrative of ritual practice. And the absence of verified linkage did not prevent the association from gaining traction in public discourse. Wah, wah. But such incidents highlight the importance of distinguishing between documented evidence and inferred meaning. When secrecy surrounds influential individuals, symbolic anomalies may be interpreted as confirmation of hidden belief systems, even when alternative explanations do exist. Remember, we have to look at this through wisdom and discernment. We have to stop and not jump the gun and use emotion to assume and start pointing fingers, okay? You have to take a step back and look at it from the big picture and start collecting the evidence. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying it doesn't happen and they're not eating babies and they're not drinking blood. No, I'm not saying that at all. I just don't have the evidence. And when we have the evidence, then we can use that evidence against them. That's all. And believe me, it's going to come out. More evidence is going to come out. This is just the beginning. Because I do believe that we're in the age of information. And I do believe this is biblical. And that means, well, Watchman says, Hillary said in an email that she was going to sacrifice a chicken to Moloch, code word for young boy. Okay, true, but we're not talking about Moloch. We're talking about Baal. The whole thing is about Baal worship, not Moloch worship. We can do one on it tomorrow if you guys want. Okay, so the Epstein case therefore serves as a contemporary example of how ritual accusations can emerge from the intersection of scandal, imagery, and theological language without corresponding forensic report. And let's take a step back here. Let's go back to the Hillary chicken thing. What if she really meant just a chicken? You know? Sacrificing to Moloch, it wouldn't surprise me if they do. I'm sure we could find more evidence that they're worshiping Moloch than we can about Baal for now. But again, this is about Baal worship. And this is about a subscriber's question. Hey, are all the elites worshiping Baal? Did they all go back to the deity that, competed with Yahweh in the Bible? That's what this show's all about tonight. But I understand where you're coming from. Believe me. I've got to look at it from a backed up fact sources thing, because I won't feel good as a Christian if I'm just going to assume and just go with an assumption. It's not fair to anybody, it's not. And it feels better knowing that I'm not out there pointing fingers and making accusations without any proof. Okay. That's all. So, in addition to fictional portrayals and sociological observations, accusations of elite ritual often draw upon the existence of fraternal or initiatory organizations whose ceremonies incorporate mythic symbolism. Now, among the most frequent cited figures in this context is Albert Pike, whose writings for the ancient and accepted Scottish rite of Freemasonry sought to explain the philosophical lessons conveyed through ritual degrees. Within Pike's framework, and I have all of his books, references to classical deities, architectural allegories, or mythological narratives are presented as symbolic teaching tools rather than objects of devotion. That's what he says. Can we believe him? Well, the imagery employed in initiatory rites, including light-bearing figures, ascents through progressive stages of knowledge or dramatized moral trials, well, according to Albert, is intended to illustrate ethical principles such as discipline, justice, or the pursuit of wisdom. Participants apparently engage with these narratives as allegory, using them to reflect upon personal conduct and civic responsibility. But isn't that how a Satanist would say it? They're not going to come out and say, yeah, we eat babies. Ceremonial structures in such systems often involve scripted performances, costumes, and emblematic language designed to mark advancement within a hierarchical order. And the progression through degrees may be accompanied by oaths, symbolic challenges, or dramatizations that emphasize the responsibilities associated with leadership. Now, these elements, they function as a pedagogical devices, reinforcing shared values and mutual accountability among members. But observers unfamiliar with the allegorical intent of these rites may interpret their visual features like robes, ritual implements, or references to ancient figures as evidence of theological commitment to the entities depicted. However, internal explanatory texts typically frame these motifs as metaphors drawn from historical traditions employed to convey moral instruction rather than to solicit supernatural favor. And Albert Pike even donated his book, Morals and Dogma, to the ultimate rebel, Lucifer himself, the light bearer. Now, if you do a lot of research on Albert Pike, you will find out that eventually, yeah, he does come out and say that they do worship Lucifer, but they don't think that Lucifer is what everyone else thinks. They think Lucifer is a child of God who loved mankind, and they more or less believe in the Egyptian version of what happened to those entities, Enki and whatever. I'm not a full expert on it, but I've done shows on it, but I don't know the full thing. But they more or less focus on the Egyptian god, and they think Lucifer is that, but not the actual Lucifer of the Bible. Okay? Now, the presence of such symbolism within influential networks like the Freemasons can nonetheless contribute to public suspicion. When membership in initiatory organizations overlap with positions of political or economic authority, ceremonial practices may be viewed as indicators of a hidden belief system guiding decision-making. While distinguishing between allegorical instruction and devotional practice is therefore essential when evaluating claims that fraternal rites constitute continuity with ancient cultic worship. So we're giving them the benefit of the doubt because we don't have enough proof yet. Now, as the investigation moves from historical practice to modern accusation, it becomes necessary to examine how the term Baal is used within contemporary theological discourse. In several modern Christian analysis, Baal is no longer treated as a literal storm deity confined to ancient temples. Instead, the name is applied as a diagnostic category describing patterns of trust placed in systems believed to provide security or prosperity apart from covenantal reliance on God. We mentioned this earlier. Now, under this framework, the essential feature of Baal worship is not the presence of ritual sacrifice or priestly mediation, but the transfer of ultimate dependence. Ancient Israel turned to Baal because he was thought to control rainfall and agricultural fertility, well, the conditions necessary for survival. But in modern societies, comparable dependence may be placed upon financial markets, maybe institutional governance, technological innovation, or policy structures that promise stability in uncertain environments. But the theological concern, as articulated in these writings, is that systems designed to manage risk or enhance productivity can become objects of functional allegiance. Confidence in investment portfolios, regulatory frameworks, or scientific forecasts may gradually assume a role analogous to the ancient expectations that ritual devotion would secure favorable weather. But you think they're going to put all that in their contracts when they sign, like a 5-year contract for, I don't know, lumber to give to China? You think they're going to, it's going to include worshiping Baal? No. How do you hold yourself accountable to finding the truth? You can't just go and start pointing fingers. You have to understand the game that they play and commit to finding the truth. But the shift here is subtle. Reliance on tools intended for stewardship actually becomes reliance on mechanisms perceived as guarantors of provision. But this expanded definition allows the prophetic critique of idolatry to be applied beyond the boundaries of ancient cultic practice. When commentators actually describe economic systems, entertainment industries, or governance models as forms of Baal worship, they are often invoking this broader understanding. The accusation reflects concerns that trust in humanly constructed structures may displace reliance on divine promise. But such usage does not imply that participants consciously venerate a historical deity. Rather, it frames misplaced dependence as a reoccurring spiritual dynamic. And the language of Baal becomes the means of identifying situations in which provision is sought through channels other than covenantal obedience. In this sense, the ancient rivalry between Yahweh and Baal is interpreted as an ongoing tension between faith and self-sufficiency. And recognizing this theological expansion, I think, is crucial for evaluating modern claims. You see, they're not talking about Baal and Moloch in any of their contracts when these big companies, agricultural companies, are signing agreements. Well, if Baal holds the weather, and there just isn't enough evidence to prove that these leaders, of huge agricultural companies are worshiping the devil. And without it, references to Baal may be mistaken for allegations of literal ritual practice when they are actually intended as moral critique of reliance upon alternative sources of security. I'm not going to put anything out here unless I can back it up with sources. And we need people to sue these people, and they need to have evidence to sue them with that they're devil worshipers. That's what we need. Now, there are plenty of lawsuits about satanic ritual abuse worldwide, but that's not pointed towards the leaders. They're only taking down all of the scapegoats, the patsies. They're the ones that go to prison, but not the elite, nor the dynasties. And if we really knew the truth and it came out somehow through real proof and truth, none of the people would just kill all of them. No joke. But again, they hide behind plausible deniability. And I can't responsibly say that, yep, this is what they're doing without evidence. So the investigation returns, finally, to the question that was raised by Maria Florencia. Are those operating within the highest levels of global finance, governance, or institutional authority participating in rituals tied to the same dark forces described in Scripture? Well, across the materials that I reviewed, including sociological studies of elite retreats, journalistic reporting on financial scandals, theological reflections on idolatry, initiatory philosophical texts, fictional portrayals of secret societies, and contemporary political commentary, a consistent pattern emerges. Symbolic language, ceremonial performance, and private networking environments do exist within modern leadership structures. Secrecy has at times enabled the concealment of unethical conduct or criminal activity, and history demonstrates that powerful institutions are capable of withholding information from public view. However, the presence of ceremony, symbolism, or closed-door collaboration does not in itself constitute evidence of devotional practice to Baal. Allegations that modern elites are engaged in the literal worship of Baal in the ancient cultic sense described in Scripture are not supported by verified, court-tested, or independently corroborated documentation within the examined record. Sorry. Where the term has appeared in contemporary controversies such as financial documents or media commentary, subsequent analysis has often identified alternative explanations or emphasized the absence of investigative linkage to religious ritual. If you want to find the evidence, you got to go out there and look for it and find it and then bring it to me. I'd be happy to expose these assholes. And at that same time, modern theological discourse frequently employs the language of Baal to describe patterns of misplaced trust in systems believed to guarantee provisions or stability apart from covenantal reliance on God. And under this interpretive framework, Baal functions as a category rather than a cult, a way of identifying reliance upon economic, technological, or institutional mechanisms as ultimate sources of security. That's how they do it. That's how they hide it. Now, the distinction between literal practice and symbolic critique is therefore essential. While the possibility of concealment misconduct cannot be dismissed outright, the specific claim that contemporary global elites are engaged in ancient religious worship remains unsubstantiated by demonstrable evidence at this time. The investigation remains open and would require further documentation before such allegations could move from interpretation into confirmed fact. Well, sorry. We do not currently have proof. Not yet. This has been Cause Before Symptom. I'm your host, James Carner. Tune in tomorrow night when God gives me another revelation to tell you guys all about. Go to jamescarner.com and check out all of my information. Sign up to my newsletter to get my news reports. And tune in tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on Rumble to check me out. And every now and then I will be live on TikTok, just screwing around until they shut me down. Guys, God bless you, God keep you, and God thank you. And hopefully we will see you mañana.
This has been Cause Before Symptom with your host, James Carner. Go to his website, jamescarner.com, and sign up for his newsletter. Also, download his free books on the breath war, the crown of blood, and the ritual machine. Fix your body by buying his award-winning detox formula, removing heavy metals and parasites. You'll feel better and live longer. Go to elitepotion.com. And one more thing, please. Just try and love your neighbor, because if you do, the world would be a better place. See you tomorrow.